Welcome to our webinar in our continuing series on career and self-improvement webinars. My name is Samantha Schenk, and I'm the graduate assistant here at William Paterson Alumni Office. Before I introduce our presenter, I'd like to go over how this webinar will work. First of all, you'll be able to view the presentation on your computer screen. You'll also be able to hear the presentation through your computer's audio system. Please feel free to ask questions by typing them in. We will monitor your questions and stop occasionally to answer all questions. Any questions not answered in today's webinar will be addressed after the webinar is completed, and all attendees will receive the questions and answers after the webinar is done. Just a note, this webinar is our most popular one so far, with lots of attendees, so if we don't get to your questions, we will answer them either personally via email or in a group email. In addition, we are recording this webinar and will be posting it on the WP Alumni YouTube channel after the presentation is completed. And now I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Victoria Nauta is the Associate Director for Employee Relations here at William Paterson University. Victoria has over 15 years experience in higher education, career services, internships, and recruiting partnerships. She specializes in employee relations, networking events, building internship programs, and developing job opportunities. In today's webinar, Victoria will be showing you how to put together the perfect resume, one that will get you the job or at least get your foot in the door. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Victoria Nauta, presenting New Year, New Job.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year, everybody. I'm so glad you are taking the time out of your day to join us for about the next 45 minutes to an hour talking about such a fun and wonderful topic as resume boot camp is what I kind of like to call it. And it is really the perfect time if you are looking for a new job. The new year is a wonderful time to get started with that search, since a lot of jobs are being posted because budgets have just come out. Lots of jobs are being posted. Internships, some really great things that are out there. So what I'm going to talk about today is geared towards recent graduates, folks who have been out for a couple of years, and I'm also going to address anybody who's been out for 10, 20 plus years. So I will try to cover all of their questions and all of the different age ranges that we have on the call today. So without further ado, let's get started. So I try to make resume writing a little bit fun, and I've revised this workshop just a little bit to kind of bring some more levity to it, because resume writing, it can be a very dry topic. So I want to talk about some high-level things with you rather than getting into a lot of the nitty-gritty, how to write your resume, what things should be bolded, what things should be underlined. We're going to talk about the overall resume and what the main reason for writing your resume is. And of course, it's to get yourself an interview. It's really your foot in the door, and it is your most important marketing piece in that toolbox that you have. Employers basically look at your resume for less than a minute. In fact, most of them will only give your resume about 30 seconds, so you want to make sure that your resume is eye-catching and that there is something on there that highlights why you are the best candidate for a position as quickly as possible. You don't want to keep the most important parts of your resume or the most important parts of your career towards the bottom. You want to put it towards the top and highlight that so an employer sees that very, very quickly and it catches their eye, and then your resume gets moved to the yes pile. Stick to the highlights of your achievements and your experiences. Most importantly, your resume should not be an autobiography. And I use this cute little graphic over here because a lot of people tend to put all of their jobs on their resume because they think they're all extremely important. And yes, most of them are important, but when you are sending your resume out, you want to make sure it's specific to the job that you're applying to and that the experiences you're including are relevant for that particular position. So just some basics to go over about your resume. And I already mentioned that it is a piece of your marketing toolbox. It is the very, very first thing that an employer is going to see about you, so it is the most important marketing tool. It makes the first impression upon the employer that you're sending it over to. So you want to make the best impression possible, so your resume should be the best representation of who you are and what you can do, and most importantly, how you can bring your skills and qualifications to their organization to help them benefit or help them meet their goal. Your resume should be written with only one purpose in mind, and that's to get an interview, to get your foot in the door. There's really no other purpose for a resume other than to catch someone's attention enough for them to pull you in to talk with you further. Because, of course, your resume is just a snapshot of who you are. If I sent you my resume, you're going to go, okay, wow, this girl has years and years of experience in higher education. But it doesn't tell you much more about me. It doesn't tell you what my personality is like. It doesn't tell you what skills I really bring to the table or what I'm best qualified at. But it'll give them a chance to get a little snippet of who I am and then get to talk with me a little bit further. So we talked about targeting your resume, and that's going to be key because a lot of people think, well, I'm going to develop a resume, and then that's going to be it. I have one resume. It's going to be for every single position I apply to, and that's really the wrong mindset to have. Your resume could potentially change every single time you send it to a new job application. Most importantly, you want to make sure that you're researching the industry that you're applying to and the job title. So make sure you know what position it is you're applying to. The worst thing that can happen is if you're applying for, let's say, a sales representative position, and your resume at the very top says you are interested in a full-time position as a lab technician. The industry, the job does not match up with your resume, and an employer is not going to go any further. And the same thing happens when your objective statements or your personal profiles become so general that an employer doesn't have any idea what you want to do. So make sure that you are specifically applying for the job that you want and that you know the buzzwords and the terminology of your field, so that way the attention of the employer is caught pretty quickly. You can go on any search engine, type in your industry. You can even type the word buzzwords and whatever industry it is, and you will come up with a list of those things. If you've been immersed in that particular industry for a while, you should know what the keywords are. If you're in the middle of a career change, it's always good to do some research about the industry, about the company, and find out what the employer is looking for, and then include those in your resume and throughout your job descriptions. One thing that's really important for you guys to do is take a look at the job description and the job title of the position that you're applying to. If there are specific skills or specific qualifications that an employer is looking for, you want to make sure you incorporate those into your resume. And of course, if you're including a cover letter, you can continue to highlight that further in greater depth. By including particular skills, and I've just included a few here, you'll see writing, analytical, research, communication. If an employer is looking for somebody that has, let's say, 10 years of research skills in a particular industry, if they do a quick scan of your resume and see that, they'll put you in the yes pile. If they don't see it and they have to dig too hard to find that information, they might not put you into the yes pile. You might go into the no pile, you might go into a maybe pile. So you want to make it so easy for an employer to say, yes, I want to interview this person because they have all the skills and the qualifications that I'm looking for. Make sure you highlight those areas that make you stand out from other candidates. So if you've received any specific awards, if you have accomplishments within your jobs, those are the things you want to highlight. You don't want to ramble off a list of what you do on a regular basis. So for instance, if I am sitting in an office and I am typing memos all day, or I'm doing email, answering the phone, those are my duties. Tell me what your accomplishments are and what skills you've obtained from that position. That's what an employer is looking to see. Not that I can answer emails, but that I can efficiently and effectively resolve customer problems with an 80% satisfaction rate. Something along those lines is what an employer is looking for. For anybody who has recently graduated or looking to make a career change, an important thing to include is transferable skills. And those are the things that no matter where you go, are very important. Communication, that's a transferable skill. If you do it in a sales industry and then want to transfer into the art industry, communication is still really, really important. So highlight those, especially if you don't have a lot of experience to date or if you don't have experience in those industries. I'm going to pause here. Is there any questions so far?
No
We're
questions.
Good. Perfect. Okay. Feel free to send them in. I do stop periodically, and I'll answer anything specific as we go along. So what I've included here is just a top 10 list of employability skills. And you're going to see on here, and this doesn't change for whether you're recently graduated or if you've been out in the workforce for a while, but these are all pretty much soft skills and transferable skills, things that you don't always get when you are in class or when you're sitting there reading out of a book. These are all things that you get on the job and in the classroom. Number one, of course, is communication, and it's a really important skill. And you need to be able to verbally communicate and communicate via email and written in memos and all of those things. It is so critically important, especially for anyone who has recently graduated. This is one of those areas that employers have constantly dinged recent graduates in because communication has declined in the past 5 to 10 years. Most importantly, written communication. People are tending to write and talk like they text. So I'm guilty of it too. I absolutely 100% sometimes prefer texting over talking to somebody on the phone because it's quick, it's easy. And that's kind of what our generation and what folks do now is you want quick and easy, you want fast. So people will use text language to talk. When you're using written communication and you're in a professional environment, you want to make sure that you're using professional language. So be aware of your communication skills. Make sure you're writing professionally, and especially with your resume, you make sure you communicate professionally what you have been doing and that everything is spelled correctly, grammar is appropriate, and questions.
Yeah, somebody wants to know how important is a cover letter, I guess, because this ties into communication. Sure. When applying for a job. Do employers actually read them?
Sure, and I know I mentioned cover letters briefly. Cover letters are still important in particular industries, and cover letters can actually can help you stand apart from another candidate. So let me kind of explain that. In some industries, they don't even look at a cover letter. I will 100% be honest with you. There are some places that won't look at it. But if you don't have it, they might not even look at your resume. So it's always best to include a cover letter, regardless of whether or not the employer is going to read it or not.
Wait, what types of industries don't look at it?
A lot of, I will say a lot of business. So if we like finance, financial services, accounting, a lot of them don't always look at the cover letter. However, once they get down to a few candidates, and let's say all the candidates on paper look exactly the same, they all have the same qualifications, they all look really good, that's when the employer will go to the cover letter. And they will see whether or not somebody can write well and communicate well. And I can tell you, when we interview for open positions within our office, I don't always look at the cover letter right away. So when we scan through initial set of resumes, we will take a look and see who's qualified, who's not qualified, and make two piles. Out of the qualified pile, and this is what employers do, they will kind of rank the folks based on what they have, what qualifications, and then they take a look at their cover letter. Cover letters that go on and on and on, so let's say 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraphs, 2 pages long, a lot of times we get tired of reading them. Employers don't read them, so they don't get very far. It's the short, to-the-point cover letters that highlight skills and tell me why you're a great candidate that set you apart from the other folks in the pile. Any type of writing opportunities, if you're going into like journalism, or if you're going to be doing grant writing or things that require you to communicate or write on a daily basis, you will absolutely need to submit a cover letter because it's going to be a representation of how you will write in your job. So though it is very important. A lot of times you will see cover letter not required on an application. If you do see that, I would still recommend you send the cover letter just in case you get to that point where they've got 3 great candidates. I want you to be able to set yourself apart from somebody else. Even up to that point, they don't read it. Some point, they're going to take a look at it.
This other question has to do with the previous slide about transferable soft skills.
Yep.
Maybe said. How do you avoid sounding too generic when you're listing those things?
So you don't want to list the skills. So I think I'll go into it a little later on with the skills section, but you don't actually want to put a section on skills and then say good communicator or ability to adapt well, flexible. You want to be able to incorporate those skills into your job descriptions. So just taking adaptability, so that's number 4 on this list here, and that's something that is a transferable skill that you can take with you from job to job, and you can highlight within a position how you were able to adapt. So you can say, just as an example, company restructured, position changed to whatever it is, was able to adapt and meet the new goals and new standards within an X time frame. So you can demonstrate how you were adaptable as opposed to listing it. And that's what an employer wants to see. You know, it's not enough to say, I'm a good communicator. You need to be able to show that to an employer. Or if you say, I am a great team player, that doesn't tell me anything as an employer. I need to be able to see how you're a team player. Did you, in a group setting, take the lead and then organize the team or organize how the work would be divided up? So take it a step further and demonstrate as opposed to list. And that's what you do throughout your whole resume, is think about it in that way of, how can I show this employer my skills rather than just listing them, because that tells them nothing. Good?
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. I'll keep going. These are just your general list of employability skills that all employers across the board are looking for. Computer and technical literacy is an important skill, and there is always a question that comes up about whether or not to list computer skills on a resume. Specifically things like Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel, those areas. If you're applying for a general type position and in the qualifications and in the summary it's not specifically looking for those skills, you could potentially leave it off. But if they're looking for somebody who is savvy with Excel or savvy with Access, you want to put it on your resume. So it's a use your judgment. Most people, if you've graduated from university, you know how to use Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. So it's kind of a standard across the board, but if it's in that job description, you want to make sure it's on your resume. Interpersonal skills, adaptability, research, all great things to bring with you. Team player, and that's not only being able to demonstrate working in a team, but also being a team player when you're working as an individual. So if you can demonstrate both sides of the coin, that would be fantastic. Self-confidence, that's hard to demonstrate in a resume, but if you have a well-built resume, it looks like you are confident about your job history, and that will convey to an employer. Problem solving, strong work ethic, time management, all great skills, because these are all things that you're going to need to be able to handle once you're in a position, or if you're switching a position. Okay, so the big question is, well, how do I organize this? What do? I have all of these wonderful skills, I have lots of experiences, but I have no idea how to organize it or what's important and what's not important. And I'm going to go over some just general guidelines with you, and everybody is going to have specific questions that are specific to their resume. And I'm happy to address those, but I'm also happy to talk with you offline if there are specific, very, very detailed things that you need to ask me. So I'm going to do high level and see how much we can get through. Okay? So first thing you want to think about is your experiences to date. And you just want to start brainstorming and thinking about what skills you've obtained through your college education, through your experiences, through your internships. Those of you who have been out in the working field for quite some time, what have you gained while you were out there that you didn't have previously? For graduating seniors or folks who just graduated in December, what internships did you just have that are going to help you find that full-time position? Do you have any related work experience? Again, if you have related work experience, you become more marketable to an employer because you have a demonstrated ability in that specific field. And again, specific skills to that industry become really important because there are a lot of candidates in the candidate pool, and you want to be able to set yourself apart from everybody else. You might have heard this along the way, and for those of you who've been out quite some time, it might not be relevant, but an internship right now is the entry-level position. So if you haven't had an internship, it's going to be that much more difficult to get that first entry-level position because a lot of times the internship becomes your first job. So you have to think of that in that light, that internships are very key. Relevant experience is very key. If you're changing career fields, those transferable skills or the leadership or the supervisory experience that you've gotten in those previous positions becomes really important. Special skills become important. What makes you stand out from another candidate? You know, are you a fantastic salesperson? Do you have the ability to walk into a room and be able to go right up to somebody and sell things to them? Tell me what makes you most important. Class projects, probably not as relevant anymore, but if you've just graduated or maybe you're having difficulty finding a job or you recently graduated within the past 3 to 5 years, class projects can still go onto your resume because it demonstrates your ability to do work in a particular field. It also demonstrates your ability to work within a group, where do you fall within a group, and how well you work together with those folks. Volunteer work also becomes very important. If you've done that outside, if you've done it in conjunction with your full-time job while you were here, you want to include that. And again, transferable skills in any of your unrelated work experience, and especially for any career changers, that's going to be the most important thing. So once you've reflected on your experience, you need to start making a list of all of the things that you want to put on your resume. And you don't need to begin typing your resume. This is just, I'm going to make a list of everything I have, and let me see what is most important to include on my resume. Because remember, you're looking at a job description at the same time. You're seeing in this sales representative position what they're looking for, so your list has to reflect what it is they're looking for. You'll always include your education. So whatever degree you graduated with from William Paterson, that is going to go on there. If you have an advanced degree from another institution, you'll include that on there. The things you don't need to include are your associate degree, if you have one, and any information about high school, because once you get your terminal degree, meaning your bachelor degree, and then master's and beyond, you don't need to include anything beyond that, before that. Your GPA for recent graduates, those that have just gotten out into the workforce, include your GPA if it's over a 3.0. Underneath a 3.0, you don't want to lock yourself out from getting a foot in the door, so you'll want to leave that information off. There's always somebody that types a question that says, I graduated 30 years ago. I don't want to include my graduation date on there. And that is perfectly fine to do too. As long as your degree is listed on your resume, we understand and employers understand that, you know what, if you're out there and you've been working a while, you sometimes don't want to include your graduation date. Mine is before 2000, so sometimes I look at it and I say, wow, I graduated in 1990 something. So, you know, it's not that long ago, but it is sort of long ago. I've been out there for a while. You may not be comfortable putting it on, and that's perfectly fine too. On the flip side, recent graduates also may not want to put their graduation date on there because it makes them seem like they don't have a lot of experience. Use your discretion. I'm not going to tell you to include it or leave it off. It's completely up to you. Where you put your education is also completely up to you on your resume, because sometimes your education is the most important thing and sometimes it's not. So use your judgment on that. Activities, leadership, athletics. Think about anything that might be relevant to what you're applying to. If it's not, you don't need to come up with this section. But if there is a leadership or a managerial position that you're applying for, you better make sure that you have some experiences that highlight that to an employer. Think about your previous related experience. You don't have to go further back than your most recent 3 or 4 jobs. So you don't have to give me a laundry list of everything that you've ever done. Your most recent is what is important. And if you've been in your position for 10 plus years, sometimes that becomes the only thing that you put on your resume, and you will break it down into different areas. So you may have started in one position and been promoted a couple of times, and you'll highlight that within your job description, and you're only then keeping one job on there. So again, it is particular to your resume, very specific to each individual case, but think about it in the light of here's the job description, what's necessary. Part-time jobs, internships, study abroad, anything that you've done in school that you think would be relevant, include on there. Recent graduates, honors, academic projects, again, you might want to include. Those of you who have been out a while or you're in fields that research and publications are really important, you'll include that. Sometimes within teaching fields, within the field I'm in, higher education, sometimes grant writing, sometimes English areas, your research publications, it's going to take you on to another page or 2 pages, 3 pages even. Your resume can turn into a CV, which is perfectly fine. You just have to make sure that the industry you're applying to, that is the standard within those areas. Service projects, special skills, all of these things, think about what is going to be important and sell you to the employer and get all of this stuff organized, because then you're going to begin putting your resume together. And these are some of the components that your resume will have. I'll go through each of these sections. At the end of this, I'll stop for questions. But know that this particular slide and the order that things are in are not the order that your resume needs to be in. It's just a suggested outline. Top of your resume, though, should have your header information, and that's your contact information. That's the only way an employer is going to be able to get in touch with you, so it should be front and center at the top. Doesn't need to include your picture, doesn't need to include anything fancy, it's just your contact information. You want to include, of course, your name, your address. Some people will just include city and state, and that's perfectly fine too. But you want to make sure you're using your cell phone. That is most of the time, 90% of the time, the way that people communicate. I know for me, my house phone is the only thing that opens the front gate to my complex. So the only time that that phone rings is if somebody is visiting our house. I don't want an employer to have that phone number because I don't answer it other than to open the gate. And a lot of times people don't answer their home phones. They have it just to have it. So put your cell phone on there because that is the main form of communication. And you do have voicemail and you can see who's calling. And chances are, and this is a really good thing, if it's a phone number that you don't recognize and you are in the middle of applying for jobs, 90% of the time, it's going to be an employer. So you can compose yourself before you pick up the phone because you know that it's an unrecognized phone number, but it could be a potential person calling you in for an interview. So it gives you a couple minutes to prepare. It also gives you a couple minutes, let's say you're driving in the car or you are taking a run, which can happen. You probably don't want to answer the phone if you're driving a car. Maybe you're exercising. If you're on the treadmill, the last thing you want to do is answer the phone while you're breathing heavily and running. And you're in the middle of a 5-mile run and an employer calls you to set up an interview because you don't have your calendar in front of you. You are completely caught off guard. Let it go to voicemail on those occasions so then you can call them back. So having that caller ID is a really wonderful thing. The other piece of your contact header should include your email address. And you always want to put that in there because sometimes the initial communication from an employer is going to come via email. They may contact you with a bunch of different dates and times and say, we're doing first round interviews. Here's a bunch of dates, which ones work for you. Make sure your email address is a professional one. If you still have your William Paterson email, you can use that one. If you have something like Gmail, Yahoo, as long as it's professional and not something like hotdaddy@yahoo.com or hey, this is me at AOL.com, you keep it professional. What I do recommend, and it's a really great thing when you're sending tons of job applications out, is that you create a separate account strictly for your job applications. And it just includes your first name, your last name, and then at whatever extension you want to include. Most of the time, people will use Gmail is probably the most popular one. Yahoo's in there. I think some people, I'm starting to see iCloud now, and it's very popular now. The one I'm not seeing as much of is AOL and Hotmail, and those ones, number one, a lot of times things go to spam, and number two, I had an AOL account too, but it dates us. So we don't want to date ourselves using AOL. So if you have one, it's a good time to switch it over. Because again, you don't want anything to stop you from getting your foot in the door, and something as simple as an email address that you've worded the wrong way or you used the wrong extension could do that. So header information, all great. Yep, Sharon?
In your header, someone wants to know, can you include your link to your LinkedIn profile?
Yep, absolutely. That's the last thing that we include. Yep.
You said last thing before.
Yeah, I missed that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, LinkedIn profiles. And if you are, let's just say, a graphic designer too, or you have a portfolio, it's great to include your LinkedIn link, your URL, or the link to your online portfolio. Because again, if an employer is looking at your resume, chances are, if they're interested in you, they're going to go online and they're going to search and try and find a little bit of more information about you. And a LinkedIn profile will give you the ability to expand further on what's on your resume. So bits and pieces will go onto your LinkedIn profile, but you have the ability to upload workshops, projects, PowerPoints. You can list all of the affiliations that you have. You have that whole section on endorsements, all of the skills that you're good at, that then enhances what's on that piece of paper. So if you have a LinkedIn included on your resume, if you don't have a LinkedIn, once this workshop is done, go and create one. Okay, and I think there will eventually be a workshop through somebody, either our office or through Alumni Relations. We are going to get a LinkedIn basics workshop put together. So if you haven't put together one, or you have one and you think it doesn't look really great, we're going to tell you how to enhance it and make it look really pretty. Okay? So next section, and it's usually at the top, is either an objective statement or a personal profile. And this is what tells an employer what you're looking for. So objective statements are one sentence long. They're very targeted. They're specific to the point of to obtain a full-time position as a sales representative with XYZ company. That tells the employer you're specifically applying for that position, that you know what you want to do. It's very straight and to the point. It doesn't tell me a whole lot about you, but if you don't have a lot of experience, an objective statement is sometimes a good option. The personal profile is probably where 90% majority of you guys are going to gravitate towards, because it gives you a chance to highlight the most important skills that you're going to bring to a company. So in that, you might be able to talk about, like, for me, I put in 15 plus years of higher education experience. If you are bilingual, if you speak multiple languages, great place to highlight that. If you have any type of leadership experience, if there's an award that you won, if there's a grant that you secured, whatever it is that makes you stand out, that personal profile gives you the ability to quick bullet point what's most important, and an employer is going to go to that section first. If you feel like you don't want to use an objective and you don't have enough to put in a personal profile, you can leave this section off completely, but you just want to make sure that your job descriptions really show an employer what skills you have and what you're going to bring to the company. So that brings me to skills, and in this section, you want to include any computer skills that might be relevant, special skills, any type of certifications, languages, all of those things will go into that section. Things that would be important to the position. Sometimes this becomes a quick one-liner. You just want to make sure that you include anything that is relevant. Education, we talked about. Yep, Sharon?
There is a question, just kind of a question statement. It's going back to LinkedIn.
Yep.
I said, just a reminder, the picture on your LinkedIn profile is professional.
Yes.
And this person wants you to discuss keeping your Facebook and Instagram profiles private.
Sure thing. I am more than happy to do so. Your LinkedIn picture, and I do appointments, so with recent graduates, when they come in and they say, oh, I want you to look at my resume, we look at their resume, and then I say, all right, do you have a LinkedIn profile? Yeah, I have one. So I open it up, and they're not expecting me to do that at all. So I open up their LinkedIn profile, and the first thing I see is the picture. And the picture is so important, so thank you whoever said that for bringing that up, because your picture makes an impression on somebody, and it should not be something you include on your Facebook profile, if that makes sense. So you have Facebook, which is your social part, and then your LinkedIn, which is the adult professional site. You should only have your face in your LinkedIn picture, and it should be taken against a backdrop that is solid. So stick yourself in front of a plain wall and take a picture of yourself if you have a headshot. Make sure that whatever you're wearing is professional, that's going to be seen in the picture. So put on, guys, a collared shirt and tie. I don't care if you have shorts on underneath, doesn't matter. The only thing I'm going to see is from your neck up. Females, make sure you have a nice blouse on. You know, if you take it during the winter, if you have a scarf on, whatever, just make sure it's professional and that only you are in the picture. So a couple of times I've opened up profiles and I see 5 people in the picture. I don't know who the heck you are. I know that you clearly like to have fun and hang out with a lot of people, but it doesn't tell me who you are or what kind of professional you are. You also want to make sure that if you're using a picture, you don't use one that was you and another person close together and you've just cropped yourself out of it. Because what happens is you tend to either shift to the right or shift to the left in the picture, and it looks like you've cropped yourself out. So be on the safe side. If you have an iPhone, if you have all the Galaxies, all the new phones, you can take a headshot, a really good one of yourself, and then use that one in your LinkedIn profile. The Facebook and Instagram, I think you mentioned, put your privacy settings to the highest that they can be. If you have everything set to public, turn that off. You want to make sure that when you're conducting your job search that everything is professional across the board. Because if I Google your name, I'm going to get pictures and posts from Facebook and Instagram and anything that is out there attached to your name. And that also goes for any pictures that you might be tagged in on a friend's page. So you don't want me, the employer, to see you at a toga party guzzling beer that your friend posted. And that has happened before because you don't realize that what your friends tag comes up in Google searches. So Google yourself. That's the best thing you can do. See what comes up, see what's out there. You might also find that there are other people out there with your name that don't always have the cleanest things that are out there, which is why it's really key to keep that LinkedIn profile on your resume so that way they attach the right person to the right pictures. Okay. So these other things, experience, portfolio, coursework, activities, these are all different things that you can put into your resume. So it's totally up to you what order you want to put that all in. If you think one thing is more important than another, you put that towards the top. If you don't want to include it, you can leave it off. Again, your resume is completely subjective and how you order it is totally up to you. But you want to make sure that you're showing off your accomplishments and focusing on the outcomes of what you're doing rather than your duties. Always use action. Yep.
Somebody just made a comment saying that they were the hiring manager for their last job for interns and always looked at Facebook and almost always overlooked people who appeared to party too much on their Facebook page.
Absolutely. And I say the toga thing in jest, but it's realistic. If what you do outside of your job, I mean, most people will say, well, what does my personal life have anything to do with my work life? They're totally separate. Yes, but at the same time, if all of your Facebook pictures are you with wine, and then you have beer, and then you're running around on the beach and you're at a party, it gives an employer an idea of who you are, and it's probably not the idea you want them to have. And yes, hiring interns especially, if you're partying in college, you might not put 100% effort into your job, and that's what an employer is looking at. So it's always key to be as professional as you can because you never know who's looking at your resume. You might have somebody who is actually sourcing candidates without putting a job description out there, and they stumble across your profile or your LinkedIn and look at you further. And you want to make sure that if that happens, you're a good representation of yourself, your university, and the job that you're currently in. So these are just some examples of how to put together your job descriptions, and you'll see it evolves from just your basic I'm listing what I've done to the second example, which really doesn't tell me a whole lot. It just gives me an idea of what your job was. Example number 3 uses active verbs, so you always want to start off with things like maintained, resolved, mediated, rather than responsible for, and really tell me what you did there. Resolve customer complaints in a timely manner. That's great. It means that you address things very quickly and you held yourself to high standards. So take that one step further and just give me more than what your job duties are. It's really all in how you say it and how you slant what you've done in those positions to really catch the attention of an employer. So just some do's and don'ts for you. Do search for mistakes on your resume. Spell check everything. Make sure there's no grammar mistakes. Double check all your dates and names. Send it through Microsoft Word, but still look at it again, and then hand your resume over to somebody else just so they can look at it. I use myself as an example. When I graduated, back in 1990 something, I had the word pursuing on my resume. It was the first word on my resume, pursuing an internship, yada, yada, yada. I thought it was pursuing. Turns out it was pursing. I didn't catch it. I think my mother looked at my resume. She didn't catch it. It made it to the employer, and the intern in that particular position that I was applying for, she was the intern and I was applying for her job. She saw my resume first, and she saw that word and said, oops. Spell check wouldn't have caught it, but I was able to fix it quickly. So even though you know your resume, you think everything is spelled correctly, double check it, have another set of eyes look at it, have me look at it, whatever you want to do. Make sure William Paterson is spelled correctly. There is one T in Paterson. That is the biggest error that we see going out on resumes, is that William Paterson is not spelled correctly. And if you can't spell your own alma mater's name, an employer is not going to take a look further, so make sure that is spelled correctly.
And from a hiring perspective, I've sat on a bunch of search committees. The minute we see a resume that's spelled William Paterson wrong and you're applying for a job here, we won't even look at that resume.
Same.
It's gone.
Absolutely the same thing with us. If you can't spell the name of the place that you're applying to correctly, or if you're applying and the hiring manager's name is on there and you don't spell that person's name correctly, a lot of times you're not going to move forward, because that shows me you don't have any attention to detail, and detail is really important.
Somebody else put another tip in here. When proofreading, read your resume backwards. You'll notice more mistakes because you take each word out of context.
Yep. So
interesting.
Well, actually, that's my second bullet.
Oh.
Right in there. Read it over backwards, word by word. You are right on target. I have the same thing, because you get so used to reading your resume that you know what comes. So if you do it the other way around, you're going to catch the mistakes that you might have made. Okay. Don't assume spell check is going to catch everything. It won't. Don't switch tenses in the middle of a sentence, and you make sure that your present jobs are listed in the present and your past jobs use past verbs. Don't guess dates and names. Don't say I think, because they can validate that information. And if you've put a date that's incorrect and they validate that with a previous employer, you could potentially be fired if you were hired for that job because you falsified your resume. So don't guess dates. Go back, be exact. Language, use it sparingly. Less is more on a resume. You don't want to be overly wordy. Don't repeat things over and over again. If you were in 3 different jobs and you had the same job duties in each of those positions, don't tell me it 3 times. Tell me in each of those jobs what you learned, what skills you got, what accomplishments you have, and they will be different in all 3 positions. Even if you are a customer service representative for all 3, you did different things in all of those positions. So avoid flowery language. Don't state the obvious. Tell me your accomplishments. Tell me why you are the best person for the position. Keep it simple. Oh, so another question.
Here's somebody with all this. How many pages should a resume be? Because you're addressing all these flowery language.
Yeah, so resume for a recent graduate, 1 page. You're not going to need more than 1 page. If you've been in the workforce for quite some time, if you're going into fields like education, places where you might publish or do writing where your presentations were important, you can probably go on to 2 pages. Sometimes 3 if you're using CV, but that's a lot of times if you're going to be a professor or an instructor. The longer the better in those cases. For all others, the shorter the better. If you just graduated, you do not need more than 1 page. If you have let's say 10, 20 years of experience, 2 pages is usually okay. Just make sure your format is uniform, that it's not overly crowded, and that you use bullets and shorter sentences on that resume so it doesn't seem as long. And just be selective when you use bolding, italics, and underlining, because if you have a 2-page resume even, it becomes too much if there's too much bolding or too much italics. My rule of thumb is that you bold and italicize the most important things on your resume. So your degree is the most important thing, not William Paterson. Your major is important. Your job titles are important, not where you've worked, but what you've done. So think of it in that respect as what makes you stand out and what is the important part of your background. Highlight those, bold those, underline, however you choose. Don't bold, italicize, and underline the same thing. Pick one and stick with it. Okay? So be a writer when you're presenting your resume, and present it in a logical manner. So using reverse chronological order if you're putting together a chronological resume, so your most recent first. If you're using a functional resume, you're going to highlight the important skills and accomplishments first, and then work your way back to the things that are not as important. Like the design, don't confuse your pattern of words. So just a couple of things: wrote service orders, 5 Employee of the Month awards. I don't know what that means. Tell me more about those Employee of the Month awards. Tell me more about the service orders. Never use first person in your resume. So if you have I, me, or my in your resume, take it out. Everything will sound exactly the same and will be more succinct if you take those 3 words out of your resume. Next question.
Question that I've never heard before yet.
Okay.
What if one of your previous jobs is no longer in existence, but the skills and duties you acquired fit the position you are now interviewing for?
You will absolutely include that on your resume. So even though because there's a lot of companies, when I was working back in 2000, I was working at a place where we were placing technical graduates, and then the bubble burst and a ton of companies went out of business. We still included all of those businesses on a resume because of that reason exactly, because you obtain skills and accomplishments from that position that are really important for the job you're applying to now. If you get called in for an interview, you're going to probably have to fill out a supplemental application, and on that application you will just indicate that that business is no longer around, and that if they needed to contact them, they're not going to be able to. If you have somebody in that particular company that is serving as one of your references, you could put that, but otherwise just noting that that particular employer is not around anymore is perfectly fine. But don't leave it off your resume, especially if it highlights those skills that are important to the job you're applying to. Use specific information. So the more specific you can get, the better, but as a succinct way as possible. So if you've supervised people, tell me how many people. So in this example, I say supervised staff of 22. 22 is much more different than supervising a staff of 2. If you supervise a staff of 22 full-time as opposed to 10 part-time, that tells me a lot too. So be as specific as possible. Put dollar amounts, especially if you're involved with sales. Tell me how much in sales you've generated. If you hit your goal and exceeded it, what percentage did you exceed your goal by? Give me very, very specific information. It's not enough to tell me you raised a lot of money or managed a lot of employees. I need to know who. And I use the term, and you've probably all heard this, but vague booking. Like if you have Facebook, some people vague book, right? They put a cryptic thing out there, and a lot of times people are like, I don't know what this means. Think of an employer. If you don't tell me enough, they're not going to have any idea either. So don't be vague. Don't vague resume. Be a salesperson and really, really sell yourself to the employer. Demonstrate all of those skills, whether it is from school, from any of your jobs, from any of your volunteer opportunities that make you a standout candidate. Don't include information that's not relevant to your job. So if you are just putting stuff on your resume to make your resume full, That's not what you should do. You want to think about the things and go back to that original list that you came up with of what is important and tie those things into the skills, to the job descriptions that the employer is looking for. So get on top of the competition. That is most important. If you're switching fields, if you haven't found a job yet, talk to other people about your experiences, have informational interviews, get yourself on LinkedIn, go join the William Paterson University alumni group. Go join, there's one for us, the Career Development Center. There are tons of people that are in there that are more than willing to have conversations with you about their industry, about their field. If you want feedback on your resume, it's a great place to start, is going in, connecting with somebody who you have something in connection with. If you've all graduated from William Paterson, you are all alumni, and a lot of times alumni are more than willing to share information with other alumni. Start there, have somebody review your resume just to get some feedback. Have more than one person read it. I may tell you one thing, Sharon may tell you another, and then the third person is going to tell you something different. Take all of those opinions in order to create the best version of your resume. If you haven't been able to do so, join professional associations, go to Chamber of Commerce meetings, attend networking events, because these are the places that you're going to make connections with folks in your industry, or if you're making a career change, your target industry. You'll collect business cards. You can then add them on LinkedIn and continue to build your network of people. Join LinkedIn if you haven't. That is my one homework assignment. And sorry, I know you've all graduated, but if you haven't done it yet, you need to get off of this and create your LinkedIn profile and begin to build your network, because majority of the time, and I know I have a recruiter on this line, 80% of jobs aren't always posted. They're in a hidden job market. So I can use an example. Somebody last week contacted me at another university and said, hey, heads up, I have a career counselor position that I have available. I'm not posting it right away. I want an opportunity for my referral network to be able to give me some potential candidates. And that happens a lot of the time, is that job postings come up through referrals and they aren't always posted, or they're posted for a day and then they come down because they've already gotten referrals for that position. So having your LinkedIn network, having your LinkedIn profile updated will give you an advantage, because recruiters are on there every day doing searches for potential candidates to fill their positions. Use former supervisors and professors as resources. You can always go back to people here on campus, to people that you've worked with, to find out, do you know of any opportunities? Do you know of things I should be looking out for? Professional associations. That will only help your job search. And this last bullet here, if you haven't heard of it, Trailblazer is the online job posting system that our university uses. Our office manages this site, and it includes all of our internships, full-time positions, and experienced positions for alumni, all in one place. We've approved all of the jobs. We've taken a look at everything. So if you've been contacted for, let's say, insurance jobs or things that people are looking like, you think the pyramid scheme type things, we weed a lot of that stuff out and only post the legit positions that are available. If you don't have an account, you can create one. If you recently graduated, you already have an account, but go on our website, get information. Feel free to email me and I'll give you information about how to get on Trailblazer, because there's lots of job opportunities, and there's opportunities for people who have been in the workforce for quite some time. And that brings me to my last slide with 5 minutes to spare. So I will take some questions.
2 quick questions.
Yep.
These are not about resume, but at the opposite ends of
Yep.
resumes. Someone said, do you have any resources you can provide that would show samples of really good cover letters?
Yes, I do. So my email address is on this particular slide right now. Feel free to drop me an email and say, can you send me good cover letter examples, and I will be happy to do so. And same thing with resumes. If you need a resume example in a particular industry, I'm more than happy to send that to you.
And the last one is, should you provide a separate reference page?
So you will have a separate reference page, but it's not something you need to send with your initial application. So your reference sheet should include 3 to 4 professional references, maybe former supervisor, professor, colleague, somebody who reported to you if you've been a supervisor so they can attest to your leadership ability. But you will include that once you get to the interview portion of it. Sometimes they might request it in advance, in which case you'll include it, but otherwise you hold on to it until they actually ask for it.
That's it.
No questions. Fabulous. If you do have questions, though, my email address is there. That is my direct phone number, so you'll get directly to me, not our secretary. Feel free to send me a copy of your resume. I will take a look at it. If you have specific questions about what you're looking to do or the field you're going into, happy to take a look at it. That's our website. That's all of our information. I thank you guys for spending your lunch hour, probably most of you, with me. And if you have questions, feel free to send me them afterwards if they come up.
And a lot of people have been asking me about, can they get a copy of the PowerPoint? Yes, you will get one. We are also posting it on our YouTube channel because we've been recording this whole session. And we want to thank Victoria because she always does the best webinars, and they're very interesting and good information. So thank you again for doing it. And we hope to do a LinkedIn one next.
Yes.
So that's it. Thank you very much.
Have a great day, guys. Thank you.